Hello everyone, this is Team 2's presentation of the Strategic Assessment of General Electric for Management 490 Strategic Management. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment to introduce the team members that made this all happen. In no particular order, they're Mark, Tim, Paul, Adenisi, and myself, Lucas. I acted as a team leader. I got a really good group of people to work with for this project. Right away when we started, we noticed that we're looking at GE at a really interesting time in their history. Over the last year, they've had CEO changes. They've been having financial difficulties. So it's really, really interesting to see GE at this time. And that's really evident in their 2016 annual report. On screen now is a chart showing the GE stock price over the last 2 years. And you can see that it's been going downhill pretty quickly. Over the last 5 years, GE has made numerous strategy changes to try to stop that downward trend in profits and kind of inspire confidence by their investors. GE has posted a $24 billion loss in revenues from 2013 to 2017, and they've had to contend with not only that, but a significant increase in the cost of goods, which negatively impact profitability. So we can see that in their annual report, the main theme is kind of moving forward. In the letter to the shareholders, there's a really interesting underlying tone of trying to convince investors the company is still alive and that change is necessary. They're really trying to inspire that confidence to try to get their stock prices back up. In another section, they called significant development. They really talked about the strategies, mainly selling off businesses that GE was enacting. So they've already sold off GE Appliances, water process technologies, and they do have an exit plan for GE Capital. And they're currently selling off legacy businesses like GE Locomotion Production and GE Lighting. And that's important because that's GE's start. GE started in the 1800s as the Edison General Electric Company, selling the Edison light bulb. So for them to be selling GE Lighting kind of really shows their desperation here. Also in 2017, GE got a new CEO and he has new strategies. His strategies kind of come in three parts. Firstly, he wants to cut costs by over $1 billion. Secondly, he wants to change the culture at GE. He's got rid of a few board members that he deemed to be problematic. And he also said that he wants GE's accounting to be more transparent. And that's important because GE can't hide their bad business decisions behind creative accounting. Everything needs to be simpler for it to be transparent. Finally, he wants to reduce the size of GE by over $20 billion over the next 2 years. So a really aggressive divestiture strategy there. The market reaction hasn't been great to this. This chart shows GE's stock price over the since Jack Flannery, the new CEO, took over. So that's November 1st of 2017. According to Forbes, they're down 20% of the year. And overall, they just made too many mistakes in business decisions, such as entering the financial services business and the oil and gas production business right before both of those industry bubbles burst. So speaking of GE businesses, every business on screen now is a current GE business. And that is to say, GE is an enormous conglomerate. Some are newer, some are older, some are brand new, some are on their way out. But regardless of the divestiture strategy, GE remains a huge conglomerate. And because of that, Jack Flannery, the new CEO, has selected 3 businesses to focus in on and prioritize. They're GE Power, GE Aviation, and GE Healthcare. So to run through them really quickly, GE Power, they make turbines, and that business is really in trouble. They've been producing too many turbines, not enough customers. Orders are down 32% year on year. So it may be really beneficial to examine either a partial divestiture, maybe some revenue generating service agreements, just due to the niche nature of this industry. Secondly, GE Aviation has a lot of history behind it. They developed the world's first jet engine. In today's world, they're more focused on digital solutions. So recently, GE has come out with Predix, which is part of the Industrial Internet of Things. And it's kind of used to collect and analyze data, and it can reduce crew costs, prevent unplanned downtime, increase availability, manage fuel level and fuel costs. So basically, bring an improved level of decision making to their aviation customers. Finally, GE Healthcare. GE Healthcare is actually split into 8 primary units, but they're generally focused on medical imaging, IT, and business services such as workforce optimization. The inclusion of GE Healthcare in the prioritized businesses was really kind of controversial. Some people thought you should sell it off because it doesn't fit GE's industrial core. Other people said you should prioritize it because it is one of the few GE businesses recording really good profits and projected to record good profits. Healthcare is just a lucrative industry right now, and that's very true for GE as well. If we move on to looking at GE's missions and their goals, we can kind of understand a little more Jack Flannery's basis behind his decisions. So GE's mission statement is to invent the next industrial era, to build, move, power, and cure the world. So GE Power, GE Aviation, and GE Healthcare kind of really fit into that really well. And the digitization of these industries really help fulfill that inventing the next industrial era part. GE's goals is exactly what I just mentioned, the digitization of industry. Technology like Predix could really help them out in a lot of their businesses, and the move from software as opposed to hardware. Also, they need to re-inspire confidence in their shareholders and investors. There is currently an SEC investigation underway. They need to conclude that as quickly as possible, and the easiest way to re-inspire confidence is to record profits consistently. Finally, sustainability. GE has an internal GE Sustainability Steering Committee, and they've come up with 3 points which they want to focus on for sustainability of GE. First of which being social, which would be they define as the workforce and idea development, improving health and human rights, environmental, energy, climate, resource productivity, and water, and finally governance, the integrity and compliance and global growth. So we can do some external analysis here and reach our own conclusions. PESTEL Analysis is a tool used to analyze the macro environment that can impact an organization. Politically, we're pretty safe here. There's a lot of governmental support for digitization, which is a major GE goal, and renewable energy, which is a theme that runs throughout a lot of GE businesses. Economically, you have your positives and your negatives here. There is really positive global growth industrially. There is an increased number of global firms, however, competing in that space. Socioculturally is mostly positive. Industrial technology giants like GE don't really deal with the societal values of everyday life, but the push for green technology in today's world really benefits GE since that's a theme for GE. Technologically, pretty positive. Like I said before, digitization is supported by the government, and a lot of companies are needing new cutting-edge technology, and GE can help provide that. It's a huge opportunity for them. Environmentally, it's really kind of non-traditional. Generally, we think of weather or climate. While climate doesn't affect GE, climate change certainly does. For GE, a company with clean energy and oil and gas businesses, this factor can really set the tone for a narrower focus on which of those businesses to focus in on. And the legal and regulatory aspect here is kind of hard to narrow in on. The U.S. is at a very bipartisan part of its history. Laws are getting more complex, which is generally bad for GE, but the intellectual property rights are increasing, which is generally pretty much good for GE. Globally, it's even more difficult to narrow in on, just due to different policies in different countries. But it's important to note that GE Power, GE Aviation, and GE Healthcare are all really closely tied to governmental regulations. So it might be the most impactful aspect here for GE. 5 Forces model is another analysis that helps explain why different industries are able to sustain different levels of profitability. So competitive rivalry, very, very strong in this industry. There's a moderate number of firms, but they're very, very aggressive. Because of that, threat of new entrants, really, really weak. There's a huge, huge cost of entry to compete with a company like GE, and the economies of scale GE is afforded because of that is astronomical. The bargaining power of buyers is moderate to weak. GE mainly deals with industrial customers, so while they do have a high quality of information, they have a very low price sensitivity, bringing that bargaining power to GE's side. The threat of substitutes here is pretty weak. There's not a lot of availability in what GE does, and there's not a lot of brand confidence in the substitutes that are available. So GE kind of has a advantage there. The bargaining power of suppliers is moderate to strong. GE deals with a small number of businesses, but they're pretty large, and both of those factors kind of give that bargaining power to the suppliers a little bit. So speaking of GE's rivals, I want to just list off a few here. ABB is a technology company, and they're a Swiss company, and they wanted to get into the North American market, so they actually purchased a GE business, GE Industrial Business Solutions, to try to do that. Honeywell is an energy company a lot of people may be familiar with. They weren't really on the same level as GE, but since the 2008 recession, they bounced back really strong and kind of leveled the playing field, so now they can compete with a giant like GE. Schneider Electric, huge power company. They started in the 1800s, so they've been rival to GE for many, many decades. Siemens is the biggest engineering company in Europe, and they're included in this list because their business is run like a family, as opposed to GE's very profit-minded, investor-minded, market-minded organization style. So it's interesting to see those two companies, very competitive but very different organizational styles. IBM's a new rival here with GE's focus on digitization. IBM has to be a rival. Their prowess in technology really adds them to the list. And finally, GE. It may seem weird for GE to be a GE rival, but GE has a lot of businesses like Baker Hughes, which is like an oil company, and GE Renewable Energy, which can sometimes rival GE Transportation and GE Aviation, things like that. It may seem complementary, but a lot of times these businesses are going after the same customers. So we can move on to internal analysis, and we start off with GE's core competencies. So first, many years ago, the CEO of GE listed GE core competency as not manufacturing and services, but the global recruiting. Nobody really cared about that. It was old. It was touchy-feely. GE wasn't where they are now. More recently, the CEO of GE has said that GE's core competency is being a global infrastructure leader. That's way more accurate, way more concrete. We can work with that. So moving on to the SWOT analysis, which is another form of internal analysis. The strengths of GE is their global brand recognition, the diversification strategy, all their businesses, and the environmental kind of impact. Going green really runs through a lot of GE businesses. Their weaknesses are their dependence on their suppliers and their weak performance in Asian markets. That performance kind of is an indicator for their performance in the global market. They do have a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of potential growth with technology and digitization of industry, reducing global warming. It runs through many of their businesses, like I've been saying. And GE Aviation is one of their focused businesses, and the aviation industry is on the rise. So that could definitely be an opportunity there. GE's threats have been threats for as long as GE's existed. Competition is always a threat. Environmental regulations and economic recessions always plague GE as a threat. So GE has a few strategies. First of which is Jack Flannery, the CEO of GE, says GE was focused on shareholders' earnings per share, and that was problematic. He's adamant and says that was GE's main problem, and that GE should be focused on cash, and that's one of their new strategies, to focus on cash. Their generic strategy is differentiation. You can see that because they spend a lot of money on research and development to remain different to their competitors. Their global strategy is a transnational strategy, and GE seems to keep things as similar as possible with only minor differences. GE operates kind of many of their businesses at a higher level than consumer goods, and they're huge systems like energy or healthcare. So you really kind of want something large scale like that, designed in a similar way with only small changes. That would allow changes to be made quickly and efficiently if the need arose. Finally, the last strategy is to be committed to social responsibility. GE has a program called Healthy Imagination, which is committed to healthcare issues, whether that be the cost of healthcare or technical issues. And they also have Eco-Imagination, which is kind of reducing environmental impact. So in conclusion here, we learned that GE is massive. Regardless of the divestiture strategy, GE is enormous. They're a huge conglomerate. Right now, they're in an incredible rough patch, and they've been in the rough patch for a while. So their new strategies and their new CEO needs to be tested. Those strategies are being implemented, and that's where we are now, seeing those strategies being implemented. But at the end of the day, only time will tell. And it's going to be very interesting keeping an eye on GE and seeing where they go in the future.